I'm your host, not for possession, Narcissa Deville, and welcome to hell. I have not said that intro in so long because all of my videos have been video essays, and so they haven't actually been like fun, different types of videos. But my friend Dylan, who I will give a shout out to, absolutely adore him. He has helped me work on scripts. He's helped me work on so many things. And he sent me this message on Facebook, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And he's like, I have to get your reaction to this because there is a thing going on Twitter. And so I was like, drama, I'm down. Okay. And of course it's always writing drama. And this time it's not about J.K. Rowling. Isn't that a shock? So I'm like, okay, I'm down. What have you got for me? What's the tea, girl? Like, I need to see this. So apparently an author who I have never heard of, and I will not be dropping their name, not because I don't want to like out them, but I really don't want to give them more credit than I think is due. I have no idea who this person is, to be quite honest. Like, my friend Dylan, he's, in the writing circle on Twitter, so he sees stuff that I don't necessarily. I'm like very minorly dipping my toe into the writer circle on Twitter because personally, it's not that I don't like the writer circle, I just don't like Twitter. To be quite honest, I don't like this type of thing that I'm about to talk about. I don't really feature it. I don't care for it. So this is kind of going to be a reaction video a la my reaction to J.K. Rowling's transphobic Twitter or essay rant. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so it starts off with this person. Again, I have never heard of her. I've never read anything she has to say, but this is the first tweet. I am reading it blindly. I may go back later and decide to do a full video essay about this because I'm probably going to have more thoughts than I can possibly get out doing this. But this is just going to be a, straight reaction video. I have not read these tweets except to know that I like figured out where they started and where they ended and like screenshotted them and saw a tiny bit of it, just so I'd have the receipts in case she decides to delete them later, because you know how people are on Twitter. Okay, so it starts off, it's incredibly bleak how many contemporary aspiring writers cut their teeth on fanfiction, a form that actively teaches you to write worse. Okay, so let me backtrack. So for those of you who don't know, maybe you're just finding this kind of randomly, maybe you're just looking for Twitter beef, whatever. I'm an author. I love writing. I've been writing since I was 11 years old. Technically, for me, I'm coming at this from a very unique perspective because I did not start with fanfiction. I actually started writing original fiction when I was 11 years old. And then as I got older, when I was about 28, actually, I had been reading fanfic forever. I love fanfic. I think it's a great medium, obviously, which is why I'm reacting to this. But I started writing it myself because I thought it would be fun. And so, right off the bat, I'm kind of coming at this from a very unique perspective because on the one hand, I feel like obviously, I am someone who has written fan fiction. I was very, very big in the community up until recently. Actually still, get questions and comments and all kinds of things from people who love my work. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who technically, A, did not start my writing career with fan fiction, but also B, someone who writes fan fiction. So I'm obviously very, very passionate about fan fiction. And the inherent assumption that fan fiction is like inherently, what is she, hold on, let me make sure, that actively teaches you to write worse. Now, this is a thread, so it's not just the one tweet that I'm reacting to, this is a whole thread, there will be more to get to, but I do have I take issue with the idea that fan fiction inherently actively teaches you to write worse. I don't know where that's coming from, and I don't know why she's saying that. I'm hopefully somewhere in this thread she will explain this, because to be perfectly honest, as it is, I don't know where she's coming from with this. I don't know what she's meaning. I don't know what she means when she says it actively teaches you to write worse. In what way? First of all, it doesn't actively do anything because fan fiction isn't like a writing class. You're just doing it and expressing yourself. And the thing I think a lot of people don't really understand, and it's funny from another author to author, I have no idea anything about her. I assume she's a writer. I hope. It's funny to me because I feel like people don't realize, like, when you're starting out as a writer, you're not going to be, I'm so sorry to tell you this, when you're starting out as a writer, you're not going to be the best writer there ever was. Even if you have that innate talent, you have to grow your ability. And the only way to do that is to write more. And I feel like with fanfic especially, you know, the more you write, the better you get, the more you learn about storytelling and you learn about all of these things. And one thing I know that people have talked about a lot in terms of why fanfiction really works for them is because you think about it in terms of, like, you know, you're not having to come up with a setting. You're not having to come up with these characters. And I know that that's a big part of creative writing, is that you have to be able to, you know, to tell a story, you have to be able to come up with characters. You have to be able to come up with, you know, storytelling elements and setting and timing and all of these sorts of things. And that can be difficult, but it's something you learn over time. So this idea that, like, and it's also very interesting because I know a lot of fanfic that is written completely outside of the world that in which it was written. Like, they're using the character names, but, like, the setting, the theming, all of this stuff is completely outside of the way the original author created it. So I'm kind of confused by what she's getting at. But let's go into more. Let's see where this is going. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I may regret that. Okay, so now she's quoting other people. But some published authors start with writing fanfic. Yeah, E.L. James and Cassandra Clare, they are fucking terrible. Now, I can't speak to Cassandra Clare. I know of her. I know of her writing. I don't think I knew it started as fanfic, to be honest. And I can't deny that E.L. James is a bad writer, but that's two examples. And I know there are tons of authors who have either written fanfic or started as fanfic writers. S.E. Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders, which is considered one of the greatest books of all time, has said that she has written fan fiction. I think she's written fanfic of her own Outsiders books, which is really interesting because that does bring up a conundrum of, like, is it still fan fiction if the original author wrote it? And then I know Jenny Nicholson was just talking about how the writer of The Vampire Diaries kind of lost the publishing rights to her book because she didn't like where things were, or the publisher didn't like where things were going, and so they had all the rights to her book, so she wrote the characters as sort of like a fan fiction deal, and that's a whole other sort of idea. Rainbow Rowell, who wrote Carry On and Fangirl and a lot of these books. Now, let me just say this. I love Carry On and I love the Simon Snow series. I didn't love Fangirl. I wanted to a lot because I relate to that idea, but I just couldn't stand Kath as a character, so that's a whole other issue. But that's, you know, listen, unlikable characters does not mean you're a bad writer. It just means this character is not someone I personally relate to. But I also think there's a lot of authors. I mean, Neil Gaiman started off as a fanfic writer. He even accredits fanfic writing. So I feel like this person is already, like, starting with absolutely no clue what she's talking about. And it's funny because my friend Dylan was messaging me back and forth, and he actually said that her first book, this author, was a retelling of some other story. So it kind of feels like Glass Houses. You know, look, I've said this before, and I've maintained this throughout time. Wicked is technically fan fiction. You know, if you're how many times have we seen retellings of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast and all of these stories? These are technically versions of fanfic. So for you to sit there and say that, like, all fanfic writers are terrible, blah, 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 it's so funny to me because, like, literally Wicked is one of the biggest plays in the world, and that book is, like, really, like, well known and beloved. I was just reading it again recently, and it really holds up. I mean, granted, there's parts where I'm like, oh, I don't care for this because I don't like how he, you know, that's a whole other video. Not gay enough for me. The point is, I feel like this assertion that, like, fanfic equals bad is just patently false. I'm not saying that there aren't bad fanfic writers. But I would argue there are also bad writers who never touched fanfic a day in their life, or at least not that we know of. And so I find this assertion kind of absurd on its face. Well, let's read the third one. Controversial take. Low effort, formulaic, lowest common denominator writing is bad, actually. Wow. Let's unpack this. So first of all, there is something, this person, I have to tell you, she gives me Jonathan Franzen vibes. And I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I've made it pretty clear on other platforms of mine. I can't fucking stand Jonathan Franzen. I think he's a pompous asshole. I think he's full of himself. I think he's not a great writer. He's very boring. I read his book, The Corrections, which was like this huge, huge popular whatever bullshit book. 500 pages, nothing fucking happens. Please spare me. So I'm already not caring for this woman saying the phrase, low effort, formulaic, lowest common denominator writing is bad, actually. Like, the holier than thou, like, I'm so amazing, blah, blah, like, get a fucking, oh God, please leave me alone with that. That is so, oh my, I'm sorry, but like, first of all, like, lowest common denominator, I'm sorry, I can't even take her seriously. This is such ridiculous nonsense. Like, how do I even respond to that? First of all, I would love to know, it seems to me that what she is suggesting is that because of it a lot of fanfic revolves around romance, right? And I think it seems to me that this author does not care for romance as a genre, maybe. Or maybe she's one of those people who doesn't care for genre fiction in the first place. I don't know. I've never heard of her, and I feel like that kind of puts me at a disadvantage in this case. It's very hard to like know what her issue is if I've never read anything of hers. I almost feel like I should read something of hers just to sort of be like judge, jury, and executioner. But also, can I just say this, right? I want to say something that I think is controversial yet brave. Writing is an art form. An art form of any kind is subjective. We're not going to like the same things, okay? I am not going to sit here and say that someone like George R.R. Martin is not a good writer because he doesn't write the sort of thing that I would want to read. I don't. I have no desire to read Game of Thrones, but I don't think that makes him a bad author. That just means he's not my sort of author. And quite frankly, you know, I find it so fascinating how so many writers will just themselves to pieces trying to tear down other authors that they think are less than, or, you know, bad writers for this reason or this reason. You know, this idea that writing is just some like holier than thou, you know, just perfect God-given thing that like only very special people with very special degrees should be allowed to do, and no normal plebeian person who's just going to write about silly, superficial things should be allowed to ever touch, you know, writing. Like, this isn't the days of gilded Bibles. Like, get a fucking grip, lady. I'm so sorry, but I can't stand the, like, hand-wringing of like the novel is dying because people are allowed to write whatever they want. Like, really? That's your biggest concern? You know, the reason people don't read is because if they do want to read, there's so many people telling them that what they want to read isn't highbrow enough. Like, I'm sorry, we're not fucking all, you know, Joyce Carol Oates or some shit. Like, that's just not how this works. That's kind of like saying, like, if you like romance movies or horror movies, you don't like actual movies because they don't, like, have big sweeping themes or subtitles. Like, get off my ass, lady. Now she's quoting again. God, I love when people quote. When people grab a straw man and start quoting what people have said to them, that's when you know things get off the rails real quick. Quote, but fanfic is often queer, unquote. Great, but did you know that queer literature exists outside of fanfic? It's a lot more meaningful to read legitimate queer stories than to mash your plastic fiction action figures together. Is it more meaningful? I genuinely want to know, though, is it more meaningful to read original queer fiction than it is to read queer fan fiction? Why is it more meaningful? Listen, this is something that I'm kind of having to grapple with myself, because I do think there is that sort of inner monologue with writers that, like, even if you're a fanfic writer, it doesn't feel as meaningful. It doesn't feel as like, this is a big deal that I've written so much or that I've received so much praise, because you can't make money off of it and they're not technically your characters. And in a lot of ways, the way I've rewritten, you know, these characters that I'm now, you know, using in a lot of my fanfic, I would argue they are more my character than they are anyone else's character. But it is interesting to see this idea of, like, original queer fiction is somehow more meaningful than fanfic queer fiction. And this, the mashing your plastic action figures together, that's so interesting. You know, I do feel like there is a lot of, in the way this person is talking, there is a lot of, besides elitism in it, and a lot of classism in it. And, you know, let me just say this. People have argued this a lot, that one of the greatest things about fan fiction is that it is sort of a really universal playing field. Because authors that, and I'm going to use the term authors that you would not otherwise be able to see, and see these works and hear these people's words and these ideas, you now have access to in a way in which you would not otherwise have had. So I do have a lot of issues with someone saying that somehow, you know, it's less meaningful. And also, I think it's very interesting because getting published is very, very difficult. I'm someone who, you know, has been writing since I was 12 years old. I have been actively, and I want you to understand this, actively trying to get published since that time. Now, maybe you can say, oh, well, then you're just a bad writer. If you couldn't get a literary agent or a publisher in this amount of time, you are clearly a bad writer. Fine, think that if you must. But what I'm saying is, it is literally very, very difficult to get a publisher, to get a literary agent. Like, that takes time and work. There are tons of authors who are now very successful who have gone through so many rejections. C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe. And you can argue whether or not that's a good book or whether or not he's a good writer. Fine, whatever. It is very influential. It is very well known. He had something like 600 rejections before he got his first book published. So you'll forgive me if I don't feel that this idea that, you know, just anyone can get published, and it's so easy to get published these days. Yes, self-publishing exists, but the playing field is so huge and ginormous in a way that fanfiction just isn't, because fanfiction, it's almost an underground thing, you know what I mean? So this idea that, like, oh, you could just write original queer fiction and it will be better and it will be more important is just so, like, the classism and the just, like, out of touch with reality attitude about this is so hilarious to me. Okay, another quote. Fanfiction is collaborative. It's about community. Nah, sorry, it's all corporate IP. Ultimately, someone else legally owns it, and you are choosing to give a corporate entity your creative energy. Really? That's where she wants to go with this? Oh my god, she's making this a fucking, like, Marxist argument right now? Oh, Jesus. This person is so out of touch. I love the idea that because a corporation owns the copyright, that somehow you are giving a corporation your creative energy, as if the corporation has ever seen it, as if they ever give a shit or would do. It's not like a corporation is making money off of you writing fiction, fan fiction. You understand that, right? Nobody makes money. That's kind of the point. People have called it the purest form of art and writing because it's not about money. It's about just doing what you want. And you could argue that, you know, it's not it doesn't have to be collaborative, and it certainly doesn't have to be about community. But like, I find it so funny that this person is just pulling these straw man arguments and then pulling out of their ass, no, this is why that's wrong. No, this is why that's wrong because I say it's wrong. Like, saying it's a corporate entity that you're giving your creative energy to as if somehow, first of all, and let me just say this, does that mean that if you write something that becomes hugely popular, you're also giving your money to this corporate entity if they own the like rights to your work? Like, I'm just trying to understand where she's going with this argument, because it just, all of these arguments just feel so like pulled out of every, like, just, this is a very hateful person. Good God. Okay. Shit, where did I go? Those of you who claim that fanfic is the only refuge for queer creatives, you were the same ones who tried to drive Isabel Fall to suicide. There are queer writers creating original fiction, but you actively hostile to them for being too radical. I have no idea what that's talking about, so I'm going to not discuss that one because I have no idea what she is talking about or what that has to do with anything.
So I just decided to do a little bit of research on the whole Isabel Fall situation. And from what I can gather, it seems like she wrote a story which vaguely comes off as transphobic about a woman who is assigned the gender attack helicopter, which is a, transphobic trope that's used against us by Republican people who like to say, oh, if you can just be whatever gender you want, then I can just be an attack helicopter. So it's very, very interesting. I so far was not able to tell whether or not this person who wrote the story was queer, but it is kind of interesting, to say the least, to see this person suggest that that sort of story is somehow radical, and that, suggesting that fanfic has anything to do with the sort of people that would attack someone. And listen, let me just say this. I don't agree with that sort of story. I think it sounds absolutely preposterous and should not exist and seems very offensive. But I also don't agree that that person should have been attacked to the point of being driven to suicide. I obviously think that's very, very wrong. The comparison doesn't really make sense to me, and I will maintain that I don't quite understand what she was getting at in making that comparison. That said, I obviously don't agree with that, and I think that's that's obviously not okay. But I don't really understand what that has to do with anything, or why she's trying to compare people who think that fan fiction is important to queer people or should be important to queer people are the same people who drove someone who wrote a transphobic story to suicide, are the same sort of person. I don't really get that myself. That was kind of a leap in logic, but as I have maintained, this whole thing has been a leap in logic. So yeah, back to the video.
I don't think suggesting that because toxic people exist in a fandom that somehow that negates, where queer creatives, are able to do what they want. You see what I'm saying? Like, this just, she really is just pulling this all out of her ass. I just don't get it. Okay, so next she says, if anything, the popularity of fanfic has served to erase meaningful queer literature. Queer kids shouldn't learn what it means to be queer by reading recycled Disney IP. You have a lineage, study it, honor your ancestors. So I'm guessing she is not a queer person herself, because she's talking about the queer community as like a third party thing. And it is kind of funny to say recycled Disney IP as if, I don't know of any Disney fanfic, but I guess that's just me. That's so odd to think that these things are mutually exclusive. This idea that you either like fan fiction or you like nothing. Like, I don't understand that. And as someone who has actively worked to put like queer history into my fanfic and stuff like that, I do find it a little bizarre that this person is really just coming at the jugular for fanfic writers and people who like fanfic is just like the lowest of the low human scum. I mean, you would think a fanfic writer murdered her mother for how, like, just, she is just coming for you. I can't. I'm just so gagged. Like, listen, I do agree that as queer people, we should know our history. And I think it's very, very important for queer youth to learn about their history and understand their history. But I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I don't think that liking fanfic excludes you from learning your history or reading about queer history. I don't understand where that break in logic is. You know what I mean? I truly don't understand the idea that it's mutually exclusive, that if you like fanfic of anything, especially Disney, which is so pulled out of her ass, but okay, fine, that somehow you can't know about queer fiction. And the very specific thing to say queer kids shouldn't learn what it means to be queer by reading recycled Disney IP. What does that even mean? You know, I get so many letters and responses from people, not letters, not physical letters. I get so many messages still to this day from people who read my work, who maybe are too young and don't have access to books and queer literature, because if their parents saw them reading this queer literature, they might be like, what the fuck are you doing? Whereas if you have a private cell phone, you can kind of get away with it in a way you couldn't otherwise with, like, I don't know, fucking Tales of the City or something like that. Like, it's so odd to me, this person to, again, have this just very elitist idea of what it means, and to not even be queer, but have this elitist idea of what it means and how people should learn about being queer and learn about, you know, what it means to be gay and all of that stuff. And to sit there and say, like, you know, you shouldn't learn about it from recycled Disney IP. And I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't get that mentality. And so I'm finding it hard to even take her seriously, to be quite honest, and to even take this idea seriously. Truly cannot fathom this idea of just being so angry that people would dare enjoy something like fanfic. So it's really, really odd to me. And it's really like, oh God, I just cannot fathom this like hatred that this person has. It's so strange and so bizarre to me. What I was saying before, sorry, I kind of like cut myself off because I'm just all over the place with this. I still to this day get messages from people who are like, I just read your work, you know, it made me not even just realize who they were, which has happened. I have had messages from people who are like, I realized who I was because I read your work. And that's very inspiring to me. But it's interesting to hear people say, like, I feel like it's okay to be myself because of your work. I feel like it's okay for me to be who I am because I read your work. It's so meaningful to me as a person to know that what I have written, regardless of what the characters are and the IP and all of this other shit, it's meaningful to me as a person to know that my story made you feel like it is okay to be myself. It is okay to know who I am and to figure out who I am in a way that I really don't think this person, you know, clearly they're not queer because they don't understand. If you come from a family where it is not accepted and you cannot come out and you can't tell them and you're not entirely sure yourself, you know you have these feelings, but you just don't know what they mean or what to do with them, or even that it's a possibility. And so you can't, you know, just go out and buy a book or go to the library and pick out some queer book and hope to God that your parents won't find it in your backpack or something and just completely lose their shit and be like, what the fuck is this about? And then you get kicked out of your house and it's this whole big scene. I think this person really doesn't understand what that underlying fear is like to be a queer person, to have that just like, you know, what does it mean if someone in my family finds out? Am I going to lose my entire family, everything I know and hold dear because of my sexuality? And if you don't know what that's like, then I think it's very easy for you to get into this mindset of just like, you just, you know, just find the queer history like, you know, an adult or something like that. I don't think they appreciate, or maybe they just don't care, that a lot of the people who read a lot of fanfic are younger people. And it's not exclusively younger people, but like, you know, it's younger people who otherwise don't have the opportunity as yet to find this information or find these things. And again, I'm not defending all fan fiction. I'm not saying blanket fan fiction is perfect and there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm not saying fandom is perfect and there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm certainly not saying that all of it is good. But I am saying it's very interesting to write off a whole thing, a whole creative field, just because you personally don't agree with it and you think you know something that I think you just don't know. I think you're talking out of your ass, to be quite honest. But let's keep going, because there's still more to this shit. This ain't over yet, Mary. Okay. IMO, I hate IMO, arguing that women need fan fiction is profoundly misogynistic. I'm a woman and I can read and write actual stories. I don't need training wheels. Oh boy, again. You know, I find it very interesting that this maybe she's just never read fan fiction. I find it very interesting the people who just really just have so much opinions about something but have no actual clue what it is. And to say like, I'm a woman and I think this, therefore I speak for all women. No, Mary, okay? I am a transsexual lesbian. You know who I don't speak for? Anybody else but my fucking self. So to say that if someone says women need, or if women say we need fan fiction, because it is mostly women writers, I think, who write a lot of fan fiction, and a lot of women who love women writers who are writing fan fiction. And maybe they need it because guess what? It allows them to express themselves. Young women who are writing these stories, it allows them to express themselves in a way that they might not otherwise. So to say it's misogynistic to say that you need, and then the whole writing actual stories and not needing training wheels. I just, wow. That's really all I can say. Wow. You really, really just... I think, you know what's funny? There's a lot of, besides classism and elitism, I think there's a lot of just underlying hatred of young people and probably a hatred of young women. It's funny that she's pulling out the, misogyny game, but I think honestly, because a lot of fan fiction is written by teenage girls, it does kind of, and I don't know, there's no percentage, but let's say, a good amount of it is written by teenage girls. It feels like because it's something teenage girls like, something teenage girls write, I think that's where a lot of the hatred comes from, because we just don't like young women or anything they like. And that's a point that, Lindsay Ellis made in her conversation about Twilight and why everyone hates Stephanie Meyer. I don't think that, fan fiction is not Satan incarnate, but like, if this is like your biggest problem, that you just had to get this shit out because everybody needed to hear it and you would have exploded if they didn't. But, hey, this is a way to get people to talk. This original tweet has like 1,000 likes and 3.5 thousand quote tweets. So, I guess she wanted the attention. She can be at the end like, buy my book. You read the shit, so... Next she has, but hey, if any of you actually believed in social justice in publishing, you'd be more concerned with Amazon's working conditions instead of shitting your pants because someone questions the value of your Harry Potter slash. Wow. If anyone's shitting their pants, it does seem like it's you, because you're the one who's getting so uptight about all of this. I don't really care if you don't like my fan fiction. Not everyone's going to like everything you write. That's just a reality. I'm sure plenty of people don't like anything you have to say, but here we are. But this idea of talking about social justice in publishing and then talking about Amazon as if somehow that's author's fault and fan fiction writer's fault, if anything else, that's really laughable. Like, girl, again, she's pulling out these weird Marxist, like, theories, like anti-capitalist ideas, but then also somehow doesn't know what she's fucking talking about. It's just so bizarre to me. And listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to pretend like Amazon is not, a bad company and they do a lot of bad shit. But I'd be fascinated to know if this woman is selling her book on Amazon, because it seems like you have a lot to say about things. I just can't tell if she's like trolling or she's serious or like what the fuck the issue is. Oh boy. Here we go. But everything in fan fiction, wait, hold on. But everything is fan fiction because it uses letters and words that existed in previous works of literature. Please stop talking. Okay, literally no one has ever argued that. Nobody has ever argued that everything is fan fiction because it uses works of other literature. Nobody has ever argued that. That is the dumbest fucking straw man I have ever heard in my life. If anybody needs to stop talking, it's clearly you, but that's fine. That's a stupid argument. I admit that. Here's what's funny to me about this. There are a lot of things that are genuinely fan fiction, and I've had that conversation again earlier in this very video. I was saying Wicked was fan fiction, like it just is. You're using characters that you did not create to continue a story that you did not originally create in a world you did not originally create and made it your own, and that's great. But like, Wicked is technically what started off as like, it's glorified fan fiction. If you write a story, just because something is no longer in copyright doesn't make it not fan fiction. Just because The Great Gatsby is no longer going to be in copyright does not mean that every Great Gatsby remake that is made is not basically fan fiction. Every retelling of Beauty and the Beast is not basically fan fiction. I'm sorry, you are not the Brothers Grimm if you tell a story that is based on that property or that IP. You are writing fan. So like, I just cannot fathom this person. Okay, last one, or second to the last one. By the way, if you're going to use an identity-based argument, I'm Puerto Rican, so you're out of luck. Sorry. I honestly don't know what her ending the whole thing with I'm Puerto Rican and then some stupid meme, which I'm not even going to watch or read. That's fine. You know, look, at the end of the day, the bottom line is this. You don't have to like fan fiction. You don't. You don't have to like that it exists. You don't have to listen to it. You don't have to read it. You don't have to interact with it. I take a lot of issue, though, with the idea that somehow original fiction is more inherently useful or more inherently important, or that it's somehow more real than any other fiction. You know, I know plenty of fanfic writers and fanfic stories out there that are hundreds of thousands of words long as like actual published novels. And when I say actual published novels, I mean like physical novels. I don't mean actual as in it's a real story, like physical novels. So for me, the idea that somehow, you know, fan fiction is just inherently worse, and that if you've ever written fan fiction, you're basically like fucking devil spawn or something. I don't know where she's going with this. It really just seems like she had a personal just vendetta that she just had to get out, and I guess, you know, man, I don't know, maybe some fanfic writer just shit on her cake. I don't know. It just seems like there's just a lot of really personal resentment in that series of tweets that I can't fathom it. And it was very stream of consciousness, which is fair because I think a lot of tweets just are kind of stream of consciousness. At least mine are. So maybe I'm, you know, projecting there, but projecting seems to be something that this one's pretty good at. Here's what I've discovered, if I may, and I'll make this my closing statement. Okay. Closing statement, closing argument, whatever. This is the last I'm going to say about this for this video. Ultimately, what I have to say about this is this, and this is my thoughts, my own personal viewpoints, my own personal as a creative person, because I do write original fiction in tandem with writing fan fiction. And what I believe is this: there is something relaxing and just fun to engage with fan fiction, in that it can be very serious. There are definitely serious stories, and there are definitely very serious concepts that I think a lot of people explore in fanfic. And it's not everyone. Sometimes it's just silly fun. But also, I would argue it's not a bad thing to enjoy silly fun, especially right now. Not every book and every video and everything has to be, you know, super serious all the time. You can just have fun. You can just be silly. You can just enjoy things that aren't serious. So this idea that like fan fiction is inherently bad because it's not serious enough, or it's not real, or it's not, it's training wheels for writers, or whatever the fuck you want to say about it. That, leaving all that aside, it's okay to like something just because it's fun. It's okay to want to read a Nicholas Sparks novel. I'm sure Nicholas Sparks is not about to be taught at, elementary school level as like the greatest novels on earth or whatever. Sometimes it's okay to just read something because it's fun, or because it takes your mind off of shit, or because it's enjoyable. And I think that aspect of why fanfic is popular is kind of lost on this person. I think it's okay to just want to write something or read something that's silly. A lot of my original fiction, if we're going to go into these camps of like this versus this, a lot of my original fiction tends to be more serious and more like heavy. And so I like my fan fiction to just be lighthearted and romantic and fun and maybe a little silly. And that's okay. It's okay to have that juxtaposition. You can write original stories and original characters and original settings and all of that. But at the end of the day, like, it's okay to like things that are just fun and for your enjoyment. Not everything has to be a very serious, hardcore, just like thing. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to. Fan fiction can be serious. There can be serious stories, but I don't think that has to be the reason that you read. And so for this person to have this like thesis that if it's not serious and if it's not like, or whatever, like, that it's not important, that doesn't make sense to me, and I don't agree with that at all. So the bottom line is, like, I think this person is wrong, and I think the reason they're wrong is because they're just too uptight about literature. I think they really take themselves and their writing way too seriously, and I think that gets into a dangerous territory, because when people take themselves too seriously, I think that just it creates an elitism about writing and who should be allowed to write and who should be allowed to enjoy what in writing and reading. Sometimes you don't want something serious. Sometimes you just want a little enjoyment. People don't watch reality TV because it's super serious. They watch it because sometimes you just want to see something absolutely ridiculous. And I know people argue that, reality TV is ruining television and it's not as good as like hard-hitting dramas or some shit, or documentaries. But actually you can like both. I love a documentary, and sometimes I like reality TV. They are not mutually exclusive. I love fan fiction. I love original novels. They are not mutually exclusive. But guess what, Linda? I'm so sorry to tell you this, but if people only read fan fiction and that is their exclusive readership, that's still reading something. And if that's what makes them happy and that's what gives them enjoyment, then I don't see what the fucking problem is. Sometimes you just want to enjoy yourself. It's not that serious. It's not that deep. I think we really need to get over this idea that literature has to be deep and serious to be important or worthy of being read. I don't think that's true. I think you can just enjoy whatever. And I don't think that if something's not serious, that it's not important or worthy of being read. Get over yourself. I think we really, as a group of writers, need to get over ourselves. Learn to laugh at yourself. Learn to laugh at life. Life is too short to be this uptight about your job. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I love writing. I love it with a passion. There is nothing I would rather do in my life than write novels. I love it. I love everything about it. But I also understand that, like, it's not that fucking deep. Just enjoy it. Do you know how much time I wasted trying to make my novel more original than like what it was? Like, I don't want to have any element that like reminds you of this or reminds you of that, because God forbid it not be original enough. And what you realize is that nobody gives a shit. Look, if Hallmark can put out the same Christmas movie every 3 months, I think I can get away with having a little bit of inspiration from other fucking things. Nothing is truly original. Everything has been done. That doesn't mean it's all fan fiction. That just means every idea has been done. It's all been done before. It's all been done before. I'm so sorry to tell you. Whatever original thought you think you have, it has all been done. There are millions and millions and millions of books out there. It's not that deep. You need to not take shit so seriously. You are going to stress yourself out and it's not worth it. I love books, I love literature, and I love writing, but it's just not that deep. It really, really isn't. And I think we need to get back to that. We need to learn that. And if fan fiction has taught me anything, it's that you don't have to take it so seriously. You're not gonna explode. The world isn't gonna end because people aren't taking books seriously enough. Please. It's so exhausting. I don't have the energy for it. I'm not dealing with it. That's enough. This video has gone on way long enough. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, again, like this video, comment down below, subscribe, do all that stuff. I know it. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. And until next time, bye.